pretty good today.
No humidity in the air.
Yeah, every day is different, huh? Well, that's because we have the AC on.
In Florida, yes, because we're
It
inside.
helps you have the AC on, which is a treat for us, because sometimes we go without AC until it gets really hot. And then our daughter says, "My God, it's a hot house in there."
It's hot these days, that's for sure down
Yeah,
here.
but we like it hot. So we turn on the air when we really feel it, but most people just live with it all the time. But we shut ours off every night and let the windows open. It's really cool.
So today, we're going to have a brand new topic called
A la Carter.
Dealing with the Shadow. Now, I don't know much
Wait,
about
is that
the
Lamont
shadow.
Cranston, the shadow?
No, it's a different shadow. It's the shadow that you learned about in reading about Jung, Carl Jung, who said, the quote was, in fact, why don't you give the quote?
Okay, thank you for asking me, Carter. Yeah, I've done a lot of reading
Very
about
interesting.
Jung, as I've been sharing with anybody who's interested. He said, and he dealt with neurotics and psychotics and schizophrenics and asylum people who used to be considered hopeless.
And he was also kind of a spiritually evolved person also.
Yes, of course. Well, yes. And so he said, in his experience, not as a spiritual person, but as a physician, a doctor, a psychologist dealing with the insane and people who want to be better, is you have to embrace and recognize your shadow. Otherwise, you will never, ever leave psychosis and neurosis. I mean, it just follows you everywhere. So what does that mean?
I thought that it was...
What does it mean to you when I say that, Carl?
Well, I don't know, but I thought that wasn't the quote. I thought the quote was that you could not have a spiritual life unless you could deal with your shadow.
Right, well, that's one of the quotes
That's
too. But he also said, as far as healing from, severe mental problems, you have to work with the shadow. But yes, he did say that without having an active relationship with the shadow, you cannot really, truly attain the heights of spirituality. You don't understand what it's all about.
So I don't know much about the shadow. So what's the shadow?
Well, I can give you an example of my iconic kind of mentor. My cosmic go-to is Kali Durga, who is in the Hindu pantheon, but she's way before any religion. They have statues of this, basically it's male and female, a statuary, that's how it begins. And Kali is known as a dark side of the goddess, but and Durga, her counterpart, is considered the creative, but without destroying negatives, which is Kali's job, which some people feel is very dark, but it's not. It's just a different part of our growing toward the light. Without destroying negatives, we cannot live in the light. We cannot be in the light. We cannot create the light. We cannot create in co-creation with the light. So
you have to take a stance, is what you're saying, against the negative, against the evil, against the dark side.
That's not what I'm saying.
You have to recognize
No,
the dark side.
No. I didn't say that at all. You have to recognize when there is this uncomfortability within our own being. That may be called the shadow. Whenever we're uncomfortable, something's going on emotionally. The shadow is not this lurking figure that follows us. Although I do have a friend, I've shared with you, we won't mention her name, who actually has never really worked with her shadow. So she experiences it like being ambushed by a terrible, dark figure.
I don't think I've ever worked with my shadow. I'm not aware of my shadow.
Well, that's why we're having this conversation today. So, okay, let me just ask you a few questions as your beloved who knows you very well. There are times, right, when you're not in bliss.
That's right.
And times when your mind is troubled.
Yeah, and I have insecurities and
Right.
and I feel...
Well, that's the shadow.
Sometimes I feel good and sometimes I don't feel good.
That's your shadow.
So every time you're not feeling blissful, that's the shadow?
Basically, if there's something obstructing you or anybody, myself included, from that feeling of at-one-ment, which is also known as bliss, which is part of the Satchidananda way of describing it from the scriptures, the yogic scriptures, Sat, Chid, Ananda,
So it's
to be in the light of knowledge of bliss.
So it's probably a function of self-involvement and selfishness then. Would that be right?
It's an unawareness factor. If people are aware that they're feeling uncomfortable, that means they're in touch with their feelings, right?
Yeah.
Which scares a lot of people. That's why addictions are rampant, anywhere from TV to, fentanyl. People just are uncomfortable with working with their feelings, unless they're absolutely, like that high you get when you're from shopping. That's why everybody loves to shop, and the high you get from drama. That's why everybody's addicted to politics and the drama that's going on these days, because it's so damn dramatic. I mean, we're not just dealing with the world; we're dealing with episode 390,000 of the ongoing soap opera.
So that's what Jung meant by you have to be in touch with the negative side, the dark, the
dark
drama
side.
side. You have to recognize that the drama is what drives us a lot, so that we can get a handle on it.
No, not just drama. Drama's just one tiny little pimple on its butt. It could be deep insecurity, which is my bag. That's my racket.
A lot of people have that.
And it could be deep, like judgment. Oh, that person's wrong. I'm the only one who's right. That's the shadow.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And it could be just deep fear, plain old fear. Because these other aspects I'm talking about, whether it's revenge or enviousness or confusion or anger, those are all mask, the way it's been explained to me, mask that fear wears. At the basis of all these negative emotions is fear. So what's the opposite of fear? Love. Carter, did you forget? Look at you staring into space. Oh,
I'm lost.
What's the opposite of fear? Gee, I don't know. Maybe I'm talking too much.
Yes. That was my thinking.
Okay, so you asked me.
So
what
I'm
the shadow
thinking.
was.
So it's an interesting subject.
You did ask what the shadow was,
if the role of, if it's true, which I believe it is, that if we do what God asks us to do, which is to follow the Ten Commandments and to like Jesus says, if you do what I ask you to do, then you will be with me. And there is a school of thought which I believe is true, that that it's what's available to us anytime to get close to God is that if we just walk the way He wants us to walk and we act the way He wants us to act,
Who is he?
he or she,
Who is he or she?
God, the Godhead.
Well, first of all, you're getting into some religious stuff, and I'm not.
We already talked about this. Let me finish this thought before you change the subject.
Yeah, but that's one way of looking at it, okay? Just wrap it up.
No, but if that's the truth, that we can, anytime we want to get close to God, we can just act in the manner that He has told us to act, and that immediately puts us on that level. That's an interesting, simple way. Therefore, but also, if everything is God, as you say it is, then the shadow is also
what do you mean
God.
As I say it is. It's just
No, but then the shadow is God.
Yes.
Also.
Yes.
So all this negative stuff is part of
Yes.
is part of God. And the way I'm understanding it, a lot of this shadow stuff is self-involvement and the stuff that we're supposed to be overcoming and that we've come here to try to approach and to do better with, is the selfish part of ourselves.
Well, if one is on the path of finding true bliss, which is also called happiness, or to be at one with the possibilities of life, yes, that's true. But some people are not that awakened yet. And what does that mean? That means that they don't know what the heck we're talking about. They don't know the difference between living in the light and choosing to stay in the dark. And by living in the light, I mean embracing bliss and embracing that feeling of being at one with nature, with God, with the cosmos, with whatever you call it. And it doesn't necessarily come from a book. It comes from within, that still small voice within. And people who do not have access either to faith or a religion or a book, they too can access that bliss by going within. And that's what Jung brought to the world, that because his field was psychology. It was not religion. It was not even spirituality. He considered himself a doctor, first and foremost a scientist. He was reporting as a scientist.
Okay.
Yeah, and so he kept, and he came from a long line of pastors, Carter. So if he
did?
Yes.
Oh.
his father was a pastor and grandfather, and his mother was a spiritualist, and I do mean by spiritualist, not a spiritual person. Spiritualists are those who actually commune with the deceased.
A seance type person.
Yes, and Jung's mother used to, the whole family, she came from a family of, I think they were Lutheran people from Switzerland. That's where Jung and his wife were from. And she just grew up communing with spirits. So for Jung to grow to be a man who studied the science, the new science of psychology with, his mentor Sigmund Freud and all the other people who were just beginning that science, he felt it very easy to go into that realm of working with that energy that is now called spirituality, which is a measurable, almost a measurable force, but it's invisible, right? So it's that God force. I mean, when you're in the state of God because you feel good. Your gut feels good. You've had a good day. You're a good person, right?
Yeah.
But if you did something shitty, like let's say you gossiped about your neighbor, oh, she's a terrible person, she doesn't do her laundry, I see her, she's got somebody in the back.
Or you stole something or whatever.
You're not living in the light. You're living against, the laws of love and compassion. And so you're going to be feeling not comfortable.
And you're in the shadow.
You're in the shadow. That's in the shadow. But that person that we're talking about who gossips, does that person know that she's in the shadow? Probably not. Because if she did, she would probably be very horrified and want to change. And a lot of people do awaken on the path, as we all are called seekers, who are trying to stay in the light of this consciousness, which is not saying negative things to this shadow. It's sort of like saying, oh, Mr. Shadow, I know you're there, but you're not going to be the leader of my decisions today. I know you're always there, a part of me.
And it's a work in progress. We're all aware to a degree, and then sometimes not aware. But it's the whole thing is a big work in progress.
Well, it has to do with what do you give your energy to. It's just like you and me as a couple. You love tennis, and I love just being in the state of creation and not being in a game. And I think about that a lot. But you're just totally satisfied with your world, and I'm totally satisfied with my world, right? And different people have different things that keep them stimulated. And the thing about the shadow is that you can't tell another person what their shadow is. They have to discover it themselves. They have to dance with it. They have to have a relationship with it and say, yeah, I feel it, but it's not predominant today, and it's not doing its, power trip over me, because I choose to be with the higher choices. I mean, I actually call that my angelic side. I think we all have an angel within us, and we have like a little devil within us. I've used that image long before I ever heard of the shadow stuff. When I first got sober in AA and decided not to kill myself with substances, I called that the devil within me. And the part of me that wanted to stay sober, even if it was just for a minute or for an hour, and eventually it became like a whole day, and then a couple days. That was the angel, the more light-hearted and possibly a flying higher person,
Mm-hmm.
making the right choices. So I believe that we all have that within us. So how about you, Carter? Are you just starting to get in touch with doing this? It's called shadow work. Does it feel
Well, it's
comfortable?
interesting because I am real aware of when I'm not feeling good, and I've become recognized that, and I have I'm in and out of that, and have been all my life, worrying about stuff and bad self-talk.
Yeah, your father told me you were a worrier since you were a kid, since you were an infant.
Feeling bad about things, and then I've discovered that I can feel good about things. I can change it. I've got the ability to recognize that I'm wallowing, and say I'm not going to wallow in this. And then I can say my prayers and have a meditation, or change my attitude, and I can go from being not good to good. And most of it's a frame of mind and a way of thinking, and just to kind of not allowing that stuff to creep up on you. I mean, I think that Eckhart Tolle would talk about that if you can be on the now, if you can get yourself on the now, and not either be in the past or the future, which is where you're always, when you're feeling bad, you're either thinking about something that happened in the past, or you're anticipating the future to come that's not going to be good.
So for you, it's as simple as staying in the now, and your shadow, your so-called like negative or bad feelings are non-existent when you're in the now?
Well, that's a good question, because if you're on the now, and if you're in the shadow on the now,
that's not so good.
You could
But maybe
so I don't know. The whole thing is an interesting thing
I have
to
a question.
think about.
Maybe for a person who has never admitted that there is a shadow of themselves, some aspect of themselves that could be called a shadow. Maybe if a person has been in denial of that for a long, long time, their whole life, maybe it's probably healthy for them to get to know the shadow and not just deny it all the time. Like for instance, I remember when Eckhart Tolle was talking about emotions, especially negative emotions, he said the way to deal with them is not to run away from them, but to turn around and march head on into them and meet them with courage. Do you remember that, Carl?
That's when he's talking about the monkey mind that's chattering away in your background, and all of a sudden you're feeling good, and you're on the now and the moment, and you're part of the whole universe thing, which implies, what he's saying is that if you can get there, you are automatically in bliss. I guess that would be assuming that the universe is in a constant state of bliss, which is another subject. It's an interesting thought, but if you start feeling bad and you start remembering, oh, that guy said that to me 20 years ago, then the way to get away from that is to not hide and say, oh, I'm not going to think about that, I'm not going to think about it, is you turn and face it head on and say, oh, there you are again, coming after me again with this remembrance that's not real. It's just ethereal. It's many years ago, and I'm just making it up.
Well, guess what? That is the exact same thing as the shadow. It's like
shadow following you around.
Well, yeah, there's some part
waiting to
of
grab
yourself.
you when you're weak.
I'm just talking about you right now because you're talking about having those certain feelings. I certainly could talk about the shadow of insecurity that follows me, and I just kind of laugh and I say, "Oh, there you are again." I'm not talking to you. That's what I say to my shadow. I see you over there in the corner, but I'm not talking to you because I don't like that part. I don't like the insecurity part. It doesn't serve me. And so if you're having a conversation with that other part of yourself, you don't want it to, be smarter than yourself, right? You want it to behave and to do what your higher self is, which is to tell it to stop bugging you, to tell it to leave you alone. And if it need be, just like get the hell out of here, eradicate it, right?
Yeah, so that you I guess a certain aspect of the shadow is to get control of the shadow and not let the shadow get control of you.
I prefer to talk about dancing with it because control is a tricky thing. If I try to control something else is going to try to control me. I like that acceptance part of our formula. They have the awareness that there's an uncomfortability going on, whether you call it a shadow or the monkey mind or just, a tummy ache. there's something that's not comfortable. That's the awareness. The acceptance is when you say to yourself sometimes over and over, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Oh, there it is again. Oh, now what? There it is, right? It's a reality, right? The acceptance. And then you take some action. And for me, the action would be to tell it to go sit in a corner and to not talk, just like a bad kid or a bad dog. I've often used the bad dog image for these shadowy things within me. It was taught, that trick was taught to me by my original AA sponsor, Jane. So that I had demons within me. I call them demons. And there were a bunch of things, fear of this, fear of that, hatred of this, just all sorts of things gnarling at me all the time. And Jane taught me to pretend that each one of them was a demonic dog. And I ordered it to come out of my brain, my mind, and to be right in front of me. And mine were lined up. They were like 15 bad, snarling, ferocious Nazi-type Rottweiler, dogs. And they wanted to kill me. But Jane taught me they're dogs. These demons within me, they're the doggy, dark shadows. And she just said, you stay there. You listen to me. And you teach them, just like the way you have to teach an unruly dog. And I've had lots of dogs, so I did. And at first, it was really, really very visual. Like these dogs would be all lined up, and inevitably one would break loose and want to bite my ass, And I'd say, get back there. Don't you even try to get out. And you know how dogs are, and they're crawling back because they're ashamed. And pretty soon, all 15 are lined up. They're still snarling, and they're still looking like gargoyles and growling within, but they've lined up. Those are the shadows that I had to deal with. And today I can tell you quite honestly, they're gone. They're disappeared. They just went back to where they came from, the unmanifested of this universe, where anything can happen and things are not the way they seem to be, ever.
So you don't have shadow anymore?
Well, I have insecurity. And I told you I use a technique to go to sleep at night because my shadow wants to grab me by the throat and wrestle with me as I fall asleep. And I use my mantra. Yeah, I have shadows, but I dance with them. I haven't tried to control them. I say the mantra at night so that dark shadow of fear of death or whatever it is doesn't overtake me. And then during the daytime, if I get flashes of this deep insecurity, I just kind of laugh at it and say, oh, there it is again. And give it a little tidbit and pat it on its head and tell it to go sit in the corner.
It's interesting that Jung thought that if you didn't recognize it and acknowledge it, then you couldn't get past a certain point in life. You had to recognize it.
And those are the people that he dealt with in insane asylums that could not let their demons escape. I mean, all you have to do is follow some homeless person, poor homeless person who has no anything, and often they are locked in this dialogue, right, in their mind. They've got demons in their mind, and they're talking nonstop to the demons. Those people are living their shadow. They've let the shadow take over. And what Jung did was to teach people, like even people that were deemed to be absolutely, what's the word for it, where you're incorrigible, where there's no hope for them. He would take people who were incorrigible. He liked that, as a challenge. That's why he stayed in the insane asylum for 8 years, almost without.
Jung did?
Yeah, he lived inside of it when he first started his practice, right out of college. So
Yes.
he immersed himself. It was mandatory actually to be on the staff of this crazy, world famous insane asylum they had in Zurich. So he learned that the people who could not get better were those who just refused to give up being at one with their shadow. They let the shadow win instead of dancing with it.
I see.
They let the shadow win.
So they had to recognize what you're saying is they had to become aware that it was an entity, that it was
Yeah.
a part of. Otherwise, it would just it
It
could
was
overtake you,
It was
and then you become it.
a spiritual
I
entity,
see.
not a
That makes
physical
sense.
entity, not hocus pocus, not witchcraft. It was a spiritual part of themselves, which he called the shadow, which if they denied it, it could take over. And if it had already taken over, they had to have curiosity and courage in order to walk away from it, because it wanted to control them, that part of themselves. And that's a spiritual. That doesn't mean that there's like the devil trying to lurk out there and take us over. It just means that as humans, this is Jung, not me, this is not teZa. As humans, we all have, like nature does, good and bad, dark and light, night and day. We all have that. And nature has earthquakes, and nature has destructive things like, avalanches, and destructive to humans, not so much to the landscape, and other things that wipe out people, and sometimes, destroys certain parts of nature too. It's constantly changing, constantly evolving, because there's this dance of dark and light, night and day, good and bad, and you could call that being in the light and being in the shadow also. So that it's a dance in nature. And within ourselves, it should also be a dance. It should not be, I'm going to control, my dark side. It's going to obey me. No, I don't think it's about controlling. I think it's about dancing, and just when it comes up and wants to monopolize our time, our energy, you just say, hey, I'm not into this. I'm busy. I've got other things to do. I want to play tennis. I don't want to wallow in what happened 30 years ago to that SOB who didn't give me what I wanted. So this week you've been talking about the shadow, because we actually had that as an assignment given by yours truly in our little group where we study these things. And I just thought it would be interesting to take note of when the shadow is present and not necessarily go deeply into it.
Yeah. Well, I think the shadow is a lot big. When I started thinking about it that way, I came to understand that the shadow is not just some little thing that's off in the corner somewhere, but it's all around all the time. I guess that would, in the same way that your shadow, if you're out walking in the sunshine, the shadow's there with you all the time. You look down on the ground and there's your shadow. So the shadow, because we're all subject constantly all the time to the whims of our mood, and a little tiny anything can take us from a bad mood into a good mood, and vice versa, into a good mood, and then all of a sudden you can be not having such a good time, even though you've had been having a great time up till then. So this whole life that we're in is constantly in a state of flux. It's changing all the time.
And like you've mentioned so many times, and particularly true applying to shadow or angel, shadow or angel, which way do I go here? Our choices, our awareness of having choices. So many people are not aware that the life they have is a result of every choice they've made, from the biggest to the minutest.
Yeah.
We create our lives.
Our own, we create our own. So if we're wallowing around angry and outraged, a lot of times we get these political things that come in, and they say, and the first thing they'll say is that they're outraged. Well, jeepers creepers! The minute you see that, the only thing I want to do is to get away from somebody who's in an outrage, because they've created their own outrage themselves. The only reason they're outraged is because they allow themselves to get outraged.
There is an exception to this, and I must say, Carter, Cristiana Figueres is one of my, go-to girls, and she has the podcast called Outrage and Optimism. And yes, she's outraged because she's the person who single-handedly, almost with her team on the UN. She was working in the environmental section of the UN at the time. She came up with the Paris Accord when it was first agreed upon by many nations before the present era that we're in right now. And she is from Costa Rica, Pura Vida. And she has a partner who's an English guy. I'm sorry, I just can't remember his name. He's also a scientist. So they have a lot of optimism that by spreading knowledge and doing so in not a dire, like down in the dumps, like it's too late now type of tone, but with optimism, that it's good for people to know the facts, because we're pretty dang close right now to the ocean warming to the point where there's no return. So awareness is really important. And I think that that's what we do here on Z Lord. We're helping people to be aware of, first, their own awakening. And secondly, once they take care of themselves, then they can take that and help heal this beautiful earth. It's just like Eckhart produced those two books. First was The Power of Now, which is for each and every one of us to get in tune with that oneness, that connectedness to presence, he calls it, which means that we are all part of the one consciousness.
Oh, right, this instant.
And then the second book he wrote was The New Earth, because once we become awakened, or our consciousness has been awakened, like, wake up, and we realize we don't have to be under the control of the shadow. We can be in the light and be creative with our ideas and be much more intensely happy also, even if we're experiencing some bad stuff. All those things are possible. I think it's great for people to have those choices, don't you?
Yeah.
So outrage combined with optimism, that's okay with me.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Well, outrage is okay as long as it doesn't come with a lot of anger and screaming and yelling.
Yeah, and it's balanced.
Because this Figueres lady,
Figueres.
she's not an angry person in any way, shape, or form. She's looking for the good and looking for the positive all the time. But it's okay to be intense. But
we have her book right here
being angry doesn't bring much to
No.
the conversation.
So you've been thinking about the shadow for probably the first time in your life, Carter, this whole week, and what have you discovered? Just being aware of it.
Well, that it's around a lot more than that kind of whole negative thing. I mean, I've spent the last years trying to escape the negative and trying to escape the wallowing around and feeling bad and negativism, and trying to get close to God, which is I equate it with positive, but in one way, it's also God has also got this negative aspect of things that is, I mean, everything. If everything is God, then part of everything, part of God is also this negative stuff that's going on around all the time. So
War,
that's also part of it.
And oppression and people being angry about policies and all that stuff.
And
that is created by, the Creator. I mean, we didn't create it. I mean, we're living it.
But I think it gives us opportunities to overcome it. That's what it's here for, so that we can be put in a situation where we can choose light or dark. And every day we have before us life or death, and it's up to us to choose. And so that's what. It doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It can be positive in that it's a stepping stone to choosing the light.
Choosing well, choosing healthily, choosing with safety, with security, with compassion, with unity. So, Carter, I just want to share one thing before we say goodbye to our friends. I think at this present time in our human culture, especially here in America, where there's so many people who are close to me who are very upset and very much in a state of angst and fear and confusion and all those negative things rolled into one, I just want to offer some comfort that what is happening in the macrocosm of society has happened to me in the microcosm, like when I decided to come into the light in sobriety. And I see very much the culture is reflecting what happens in nature also when there's preparing for a big shift. A big shift is coming because there's this wave of energy that is so negative that it's got to bust through, and people are going to realize that there's something else besides fear. And the opposite of fear is love. I know you forgot that. I put that on the spot there, but we talk about God is love, compassion is love, happiness is love. I mean, love is a many splendored thing. It has big, big, big definitions. But basically, it's when you're in that state of at-one-ment. And fear is when you're not in that state of at-one-ment. And you get really freaked out and you feel like, oh God, what's going on? I don't understand. It's not the way I thought it should be. All that stuff, right? That's fear.
It's fear, and we're subject to not understanding it well, because things definitely work out most of the time, and things are not as they appear, and we'll assume that they're a certain way, and then you find out that it's a function of some bad information you got, or some dishonest something that was said to you,
drama.
and things just aren't as they appear, and things are, the world is working away, it going through its thing, and what we feel and feel strongly about don't necessarily make any difference or don't even matter. We can neurotically be involved in intense feelings, and meanwhile, it's all our own stuff, most of it.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say. It's our own stuff if we're feeling really that things are just not the way they're supposed to be. Because guess what? This universe is in charge, not us. And by this universe, I don't mean that flippantly, like, some airy-fairy, old hippie lady, but the consciousness that is ever evolving within us, and we are the collective unconscious, as Jung also said, but we can be conscious of the collective. We don't have to just unconsciously, receive signals from it, as he explained, the collective unconscious, as everybody evolves planetarily. I mean, this is just such an amazing opportunity to be on Earth as a human being. I just hope everybody remembers that human emotions are just part of being human. But the real essence of our life here is our connection to our spirit. It is not about what's going on in the material world or in your family life or in your political life or your work life. It is what's going on with your spirit, your relationship with the light, God, or whatever you call it, the one, nature, whatever works for you, the chi, the source. That's the most important thing.
There you go.
And the shadow is part of it. We can't just push it away. We have to accept it.
Remember that radio show about the shadow when we were kids?
Yes, that's why I said Lamont Cranston.
Is that who it was?
I had a cat.
He used to laugh.
I named,
shadow knows.
I named a cat Lamont after the shadow. Do him again. Do
the
him.
shadow knows. You remember that?
No.
That's the way it was.
That's scary. God, Carter. Okay, everybody, we love you.
All right.
If nobody's told you that today, believe it. We do love you
And
so
all
much.
is well somehow through all of this madness that's going on. There are wonderful things afoot.
Yes. There's so many magical things.
So many wonderful, great things are afoot.
One of the great things that maybe people are not aware of, I just want to share this news. but 3 or 4 major dams have been removed from Klamath River out in Oregon, Colorado, and whatever,
Really?
California. And right now, there's a troop of 30 or 40 indigenous teens who are kayaking the entire source of the river for the first time in maybe 100 years.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and they all learned how to kayak for it, and it's a wonderful thing. So people need to spread more good news together. So the salmon will be able to travel up the river, which they have not been able to do for 100 years, and all sorts of other indigenous and wildlife and natural life will be able to
There's a lot
benefit.
of good indigenous stuff going on these days, too, yeah.
Right. So blessings to
We
all
have
the
it here in Florida,
all the
Fort Mose and all.
kayakers over in the Klamath River. We send our blessings to you
Right
guys.
on. Okay.
Okay. Om Namah Shivaya.
All right.